To all those people watching, I like to remind everyone that this video is not made for kids. It's for older fans and adults. Enjoy the fucking video! If you ever visit the island of Sodor and head to the station of Kildane, you will find the Peel Godred branch line. The branch line is unique compared to the rest of the island. This line is run by electric engines. There are 4 of them and their names are Peel Godred, Hammond Lake, Kildane and Abbey. They mainly pull freight from the aluminium company, but they take passengers too. The reason why they work on the branch line is because the line is on a very steep gradient, so the steam and diesel engines have to transfer goods and passengers to Kildane. But one day, some people have found slate in the nearby mountains at Shanedooney. The slate looks bluish according to the people who discovered it, and eventually was established into the Blue Mountain Quarry. 2 lines were built, one for the Skarloey engines from the lake, and one for the northwestern engines on the Peel Godred. However, it's the only part of the line that wasn't electrified, so the steam and diesel engines get to travel to it. However, because of the heavy grade, they had to be pulled by one of the electric engines. The engines didn't mind being pulled by them, but James was different. If you ever visit the island of Sodor and are interested in the stories from the various railways, then you should visit the Railway Archives. It's a treasure trove of stories over the years with all of the engines across the island of Sodor, big or small. Let's take a look at all the stories that are a blast from the past for the engines of Sodor. He often complained about it in the shed, but the other engines ignored him. But he kept going on and on and on about it whenever he was needed to collect slate from the quarry. "It isn't fair," he always complained. "Why do we always get an electric engine to pull us up to that quarry?" The other engines kept on ignoring him, but it was going on for so long that Donald couldn't take it anymore. "Because, James, the grades are too steep for us to take our trains on our own. We need them because they are capable," he snapped. "Rubbish! Jordan's Hill isn't hard for us to climb over," James protested. "Unless you're in need of my help," chuckled Edward. James fumed at Edward for his teasing, but he kept on complaining about the idea of being pulled by an electric unit. "Donald is right, James." It was Sir Charles Topham Hatt. "You can't go up the grade with a heavy train." But James was still arguing. "But, sir, Donald went up the mountains himself once when he brought one of the mountain engines home." "That's because Caldy was late, so I wasn't in any need of assistance. You are different." But James wasn't convinced, and Sir Charles couldn't be bothered to argue with an engine as stubborn as James. "Very well, James. Tomorrow I still want you to go to the quarry and collect the slate and bring them to the harbour. But you're still going to be pulled by one of the electric engines, and that is the end of it." James was cross, but there wasn't anything for him left to do. He was still sulky about it as he pulled into the yards at Kildane. "Good morning, James," called Howard. "Collecting more slate, I expect?" But James wasn't in the mood to be chirpy. "Just get moving and take me up to the quarry," he replied crossly. Howard was taken aback, but he did as he was told and was coupled to James. "What's with him?" asked Abby. "Every time he's here, he's always grumpy." The other electric engines couldn't understand James's attitude as well, but we know, don't we? Eventually, Abby got her answer when she met up with Henry at the junction. Henry explained what James had said to them about the electric engines. "Is that so?" replied Abby. "Well, too bad for him then." Just then they heard a whistle from the distance as James came rushing down the mountain on his own with his trucks full of slate. "This is the best part of the journey," he would say. "No help from these electric engines." "Ugh," groaned Abby, and she rolled away with her passengers. But despite James going down the hill, he was making his way back to the quarry and had to be pulled by the electric engines once again. This time, it was Abby's turn. "Great," James groaned. "This again." "Say, James, complain about us one more time and I won't take you to the quarry," replied Abby crossly. "You're welcome to it," James said as he rolled his eyes. Abby rolled her eyes as well, and when the guard blew his whistle, Abby pulled James hard as she left the station. "Be careful!" James shouted, but Abby just ignored him as she rolled away to the quarry once more. Throughout the day, James kept on complaining about being pulled by the electrics until he puffed away with his last train for the day. "At last, some pace," sighed Abby happily, and all the other engines agreed. "Too bad he'll be here tomorrow," sighed Peel Godred. "You just have to spoil the moment, Peel," replied Abby crossly. Later that night, a storm was raging across the island. The electric engines were at least safe and sound in their sheds. The next morning, the storm had passed, and miraculously, it hadn't damaged the electricity that is supplied to the branch line. Sir Charles came to the yards and told him that the work was to go on as usual, but a reduced speed was implemented due to the weather condition. "Also," he added, "James will be coming today to collect slate from the quarry." The electric engines groaned, but Abby had an idea to get back at James for complaining about being pulled by them. She then spoke of her plan to the other engines, and they were pleased. Meanwhile, James was puffing down the line towards the junction. He was still grumbling. "Great, back to work for those diesel engines." "Diesels," replied his driver. "Don't you mean electrics?" "Oh, they're just diesels without a motor and the nasty smell of fumes," he complained. At the junction, James pulled into the yards. "Right," he whistled. "Come on, I need to get up that hill of yours." But the electric engines didn't move. James was puzzled. "Are you deaf or something? Get moving!" And he whistled to them again. At last, Abby spoke. "We can't today, James. The storm has damaged the electricity and we can't be provided with power." The driver and fireman went towards their crews, but secretly they were told by Abby of her plan, and the driver and fireman promised to keep it a secret. They went back to James and told him the news. "They told us that we'll have to go up the grade to the quarry on our own," they said. James smiled. "Finally!" he whistled. "Come on, let's get going." So James puffed away with his heavy train behind him as he battled his way up the gradient. While Abby and the others smiled to each other. At first, James had found the climb easy. "I don't need them, I don't need them," he said. But as he puffed further and further up the line, he could feel the line being steeper and steeper, that he started to feel tired. But he kept on puffing. "I can do it, I can do it!" But it got harder and harder for him as he was going slower and slower, and soon he had to stop in the middle of the line. "Oh, no!" he huffed. The driver and fireman decided to reverse James back down to the first station. Permission was given by the signalman, and they did just that. James found it most embarrassing that he got stuck on the gradient as he backed into the yards of Kildare. But to his surprise, he could see Abby standing outside of her shed with her pantograph on the wires humming quietly. "But I thought the electricity was out from the storm," James said in surprise. Then Abby, the other electrics, and his crew all laughed. "What? What's so funny?" "Tricked you," replied Abby, still laughing. "Tricked me?" Then Abby explained what they did. James looked down at his buffers, knowing quite well that he deserved to be fooled after what he had conquered. When Sir Charles heard about this, he didn't appreciate the electrics for lying to James and causing confusion and delay to the traffic on the branch line. But he also knew that it served James right for his complaining about being pulled by the electrics. "I hope your mountain climbing shows why the electric engines are important to you as well as any other engine, James," he said crossly. "Yes, sir," replied James sadly. So Abby was coupled to James, and the two engines set off to the Blue Mountain Quarry. Abby spoke first. "I'm sorry for playing a trick on you, James," she sighed. "There's no need for any apology, Abby," replied James. "I was the one complaining like a broken record and thought I could easily climb this mountain. But after doing it and seeing how well you can do it, I'm glad to know that there are engines like you to help." Abby smiled, and ever since that day, James appreciates the electric engines whenever he was needed at the quarry. He doesn't really complain a lot about it anymore and is always happy. As the years passed James's climb, Gator came to the island, and Sir Charles Topham had decided that he would be better at taking the slate from the quarry to Tidmouth. But James would often meet the electrics whenever he was pulling a train on the main line. They were sad when he told them that he was to work on the Kirk-Corona branch line, but he would whistle whenever he passed by pulling the fish trains, and the electric engines honked their horns back, knowing that James was still their friend, no matter how near or far they are.